I'm really pleased to welcome Olha Madylus, who'll be talking to us today about 5 strategies for the teen classroom. Olha Madylus is a freelance author, materials designer, consultant, and teacher trainer.
Ooh.
So, got your slides there, Olha. I'll pass
Yes,
over to you.
Already moving around. Hello, everybody. Before I start, I'd really like to say a huge thank you to Jenny and Katie and Wendy and all the team at behind the scenes. This is just such an amazing event, and I feel so lucky to be part of this. And it's just fantastic to see where you're all coming from. Just as you're joining, there are people coming from Latin America, people coming from Tajikistan, Serbia, and I feel very honoured that you are taking time to attend this session. So what am I talking about today? Well, before we begin, I want to think about a bit of history. Are you ready for a history quiz? I've really noticed that people are participating a lot in the chat box, so I'm going to give you lots of opportunities to do that in the next half hour. Now, September 1980 is a very important time in history. If you are old enough to think back, you might remember that is when John McEnroe was #1 in men's tennis in 1980. It's also a very important time for me. September 19 was very important for me personally. Can anybody guess why this particular time was very, very crucial and important in my life? Can anybody guess? Oh, sorry, everything's jumping around. Oh, so I did not become pregnant in that time. Yes, you've guessed. This is when I became a teacher. So it's quite scary to think how long ago that was. And so this is a really interesting opportunity for me to actually try and pull together some of the things that I've learned in that incredibly long period of time. And what was interesting then when I started teaching in September 1980 was that the first group of students I had were teenagers. And so teenagers have been an important part of my career for my entire teaching life. And as a teacher and afterwards as a teacher trainer, I have really focused on 2 very important questions that I have asked myself many, many times, and teachers have asked me when I've been training, when I've been at events like this. And that is the 2 key things about how do we motivate our teenage students and how do we deal with the fact that they're always a very mixed bunch, this idea of mixed ability. And a very funny thing I have to share with you is when I was looking for a picture of a teen student, and I went to look for images, that they all look like this, that a teen student in terms of what the image is this very alert, very happy, very obviously focused student. And this is not always the case, as we know. So 5 strategies. I'm going to condense my lifetime's experience into the next half hour. So the first thing I want to think about is, as we teach teenagers, is quite often, and this is particularly the case, I think, when you're a young teacher, and that was the case with me, is that when you stand in front of your class of students, you see a class. You are very influenced by the fact that, for example, they may all be B1 learners, they may be grade 6, grade 7. We give them a label and we are kind of anticipating, expecting that they are very homogeneous, that they are a class, that they're all the same. So what I've learned over the years is that's dangerous, that what we need to do as teachers is to accept that they are all very different. They may all be preparing for the same exam. They may all be studying the same book. They may all have the same first language, but they are so different in so many different ways. So as a teacher, I feel that my main role really a lot of the time is to be a diagnostician, to think about who are my students, what's happening, why is this happening? So there are three things here that I think is really important to diagnose, to try and understand where they're coming from, and to differentiate if possible. So let me talk about this in a bit more detail. So in terms of diagnosis, I spend a lot of time observing my students and trying to work out where they are strong, where they are weak, where they need help, and asking myself this question, not thinking that they need to be doing page 72 exercise 4, but what's happening with them? What are they good at? So a lot of monitoring, a lot of watching them and listening. And what are their goals? And they're very, very different in terms of their goals and things that might be holding them back. So here's a little story. Many years ago, when I was teaching in Greece, in Thessaloniki, I had many, many classes of teenagers, and they were great fun and sometimes challenging. But I had one boy who seemed to be very disinterested. And he said to me, he said, I don't need English. I'm Greek. I don't need English at all. And I said, oh, that's interesting. What kind of job would you like to have in the future? And he said, I want to be a football player. I said, okay, that's fantastic. What team would you like to play for? And he said, Manchester United. I thought, that's fantastic, Manchester United. And at the time, Alex Ferguson was the manager, and I said, does he speak Greek? And a student said, no. I said, well, how will you speak to him? How will you discuss your salary? And the journalists who come to interview you, how will you speak to them? They don't speak Greek, do they, in England? And he went, maybe I learn English. So sometimes we have to ask these questions to kind of find out what is going on, and why students might need English, might need to develop those skills, and maybe what is stopping them thinking it's important. And the very, very important question is I've learned to ask this over the years, is what is my job? How can I help those individual students? Understanding them is super important. And there is quite often a fear factor with teens. A bunch of teens can be very intimidating, and we just want to kind of teach the lesson, but trying to really meet them there, trying to find out. So listening to them, watching, observing them, seeing how they work together, really, really important. And this can only really happen if you have classes where they're working in groups, where they're collaborating, where you're not standing at the board all the time. Talk to them, really chat to them. And this is, we need to find out how they feel, what progress they think they're making, what's holding them up. So one thing that I've learned, I really want to share this with you, and I started doing this many years ago, and it has worked for me. I'm not saying this is a magic cure, but this is my experience of actually giving students tutorials and calling them tutorials, not chats. And my students have responded really positively, even with the younger teens. If they were all doing some group work, some project work, I would make appointments with them. They'd come out the classroom and chat to me and really talk about things. And this made them feel noticed and important. And this, I think, is really crucial, that students need to feel seen, that lots of students tend to disappear. If you're the super clever one or the super naughty one, you get noticed. But if you're just plodding along, or you're suffering, you're just trying to keep quiet, you disappear. Now, this is something that I read recently, and I thought this was so interesting. I've not heard it called this Hawthorne effect. Um, and this is really important. It's the idea that when students know that somebody is noticing them, paying attention to them, caring about them also, that it increases their motivation, that they're not invisible. And I think that's a really important thing. And when you have a class, so you might have 30, 40 students, it's not easy, but it is important. So if we talk to them, I think having an honest dialogue, we need to be honest and we need to be open. So if students, you talk to your students and you say, I don't know, well, sweetheart, you don't seem very interested in my lessons, and they say, well, your lessons are boring, we mustn't take this too personally. We must try and find out what is boring to that student. And you know, it might be boring to some students, and we have to accept that, because it's not an honest dialogue if we don't listen to them and give them that validity, as Fernando is saying. So we need those opportunities to listen to each other. And from that, I think there is room to have some negotiation about what students do in terms of work. Just a little sideline here. I think getting students to be able to talk about how they're doing, these kind of self-assessment tasks feature a lot in many course books. Do you use them? Do your students use them? How do you use them? I think we could really get more value out of this, rather than just say, oh, do the self-assessment. You know, talk about it. Get students to share with their, you know, their classmates. Can I describe people in English? Am I good at this? Do you think I'm good at this? I think, yes, Belen says that they're useful because we bring to the surface the whole process of learning and developing. So differentiation, it's a very difficult thing to do, and I'm just going to ask you to consider a few things. I think it's really hard to differentiate learning in class, but is it possible? Is it possible in any way where you're teaching to give students different things to do? I have always opted for this for homework, because I think it's much easier to allow students to do different things for homework. And you know, it doesn't matter. They don't have to do the same thing. I think we get stuck sometimes is, oh, they haven't all done exercise 7. They haven't all done it anyway, to be honest. So can we allow them to do different types of activities? So for example, if one student feels and recognizes that they're not very good at reading activities and doing multiple choice, can we say to them, well, you do a bit more of this and don't do the writing? And things like project work, as Fernando is saying, is really valid for this too. So they can do different things when they do projects. And can they get to choose it, rather than us saying, I think you should do this? Can we ask them what they think they could be doing for their development to get better? And I think that's really important. Yes, the Elogia is saying many of her students are demotivated, and that's exactly what we're talking about. How can we motivate them? So that was number one. So number one was all about trying to really understand our students. Number two, and this is something that many people have been talking about during this wonderful festival of celebration of English language teaching, is that we're at a crossroads really as English language teachers, in that we have to accept that we're not just teaching language, and that language isn't just a subject, that language is much bigger than that. And language is a way of expressing who we are and doing so many more things. So it's all about skills, that we're really looking at how we can develop student skills. And if students, teenagers, really appreciate this, can understand that a lot of what we do in class, a lot of the ways that we get them to collaborate, to be creative, etc., are developing much more general skills that they can use in any language, in different scenarios, in different jobs. This also can be very motivating. I'm not going to say very much about this because a number of people have mentioned the Cambridge framework for life competencies. If you don't know it, find it. I'm sure ladies can send you links for this. Just go online and read it, and it's really interesting. But these kind of skills that we have really link into different kinds of thinking. And I find that students are much more motivated if they're allowed to think, to be creative, to really develop these skills. So, for example, in terms of critical thinking, I love these kind of activities that get students to use lateral thinking activities. So here's one. You may know this. If you know it, let's just be quiet for a second. What's going on here? Father and son are in a bad car crash. They're both taken to hospital. The son is taken into the operating theatre. The doctor there looks at the boy and says, "Oh, that's my son. How is this possible?" So you have to. Charlotte knew this already, but this is a lovely type of activity. This is one of the most common lateral thinking activities. But these kind of tasks where you get students reading and they're conscious of the fact they're having to use logic, they're having to use previous experience, this is a kind of task that is really, really useful for them because they can see that they're doing it on different levels, the linguistic level and the cognitive level. This is a really interesting one as well. I like things that say imagine. Think about this and imagine. Push your ability to deal with language into different areas. So imagination is a very important thing. So don't just tell me what things are, what you've read. Imagine what it's like to live in another country. I don't have to because I've done that, but I certainly know the kind of things that I would miss. But get students to move into different areas of thinking in the classroom. I will say a little bit about oracy because I'm a real fan of looking at language like this. Yesterday, Ali Kensington did a fantastic presentation on oracy. So if you didn't see her, you can watch that on YouTube in the future. She put this together very well. But basically, what we're trying to get students to do is not just speaking and listening, that there are more factors involved in oracy. And so we want them to be able to use language in different ways. So obviously, linguistically, cognitively, physically first. So Annie was talking about voice, body language, linguistically, the words we use, the rhetorical devices we use, cognitively, the logic of what we say, how we organize things, socially, who are we talking to, how do we, make a link with our audience, and emotionally, our confidence, our feelings, all these things are super important because we don't just use language to describe something. We don't just say, "Oh, what's this? This is a pen." We use language to really communicate so many different things, but also on so many different levels. Now, one thing I'm a big fan of is drama and role plays. And I think we can really inject oracy into many aspects of our course books and our lessons. So, for example, I defy you to find a course book, a series of course books that doesn't have a unit about describing houses and homes. I bet all of you have done units in books like this. And depending on the level, it might just be there are 5 doors, there are 3 bedrooms, and at higher levels, it's spacious, it's luxurious. There are, there's a swimming pool, whatever. So even at different levels, students get to describe this. And, it's one thing to describe a picture. What I get students to do is to do a role play. So they can do it in pairs or 3s maybe. One person is the estate agent and they're trying to sell this property to a famous celebrity. So for example, the student could choose to be, right, I'm Lady Gaga. I need a house for me and my dogs. And the estate agent has to show her around an imaginary house and say, well, here you have, there are 2 swimming pools. There's one for you and there's one for your dogs. It's very special and very safe. And students could get to use that language, but as they do it, when I set this task, you can see they're using body language, they're being creative with their vocabulary. Obviously, that somebody's saying, how can you do this with distance learning? Well, they can, if they're working online, they can do online role plays together. You can get them into breakout rooms. There's still a possibility of doing that. And I'm sure there are lots of people who've done a lot on online teaching that can find ways of doing that. But I think it's a really important thing. And of course, you don't correct it while they're doing it. You might do that later, or you might not do it at all. You're really trying to develop their confidence and pushing them to use language in a realistic way. So even when you have a little dialogue in a course book, you could do this in a very flat, just linguistic way. Well, let's push this. Let's say to them, okay, do it as a role play. Imagine maybe you're a very shy customer and you're a very confident shop assistant. Try and do it in a different way. Take it as a role and really try and inject it with that meaning and that personality, and think about it as part of a big picture. Why do you, maybe you desperately need a torch for some reason, I don't know, you're going out at night and you want to find something. You might be a treasure hunter. So all these things are possible. And things like just going back to life skills, things like giving presentations, building your confidence, really using language. And here the oracy and the life skills really combine. Okay, so my top tip number 3 is, hopefully you've already had some examples of this, that we need to find tasks that engage and excite our students. When you're a teenager, school can be so boring, lesson after lesson of the very similar things. And it's just, it's heartbreaking that they get numbed and bored. So there are lots of different ways of doing this. And I've already given you some examples, like creating role plays, getting them to engage with that. Here's an idea for a warmer. And I want you to be ready on your keyboards for your chat boxes, because it's a game. And you can do this online, you can do it live. So, and you can do it at different levels, very low levels and very high levels, and you just have to adjust the game a bit. So, okay, good morning, class. Hope you've all had a nice weekend. We're going to play our game, and today's letter is P. Okay. So number 1, I want you to think of one country beginning with P. Go, 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 quick. Who's going to be the first person? Fantastic, that's so quick, that's so quick, that's so quick. Fantastic, okay, double the country, stop. Number 2, 2 adjectives to describe personality beginning with P. Go, go, go. 2 adjectives. Fantastic, pessimistic, wow. God, you are fast. Are you ready for number 3? 3 things you can wear beginning with P. Can you manage that? Okay, we've got pants. You are so good. Pajamas. Yeah, it was pajamas I was thinking of as well. Fantastic. Right. What's going to be 4? 4 things you can eat. Go, 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 go. Yay, pineapple, pumpkin, lots of things. And then finally, 5 verbs. Any verbs, you know, beginning with P. I just saw someone say P, but that's true. So this is just a little activity, really, really straightforward. You can make it easier for low levels and just say 1 or 2, or you can really push it for like C1, C2 levels with a lot more. But it's just a nice way to get some energy into the classroom, really engaging our students, and that's very important. So just a few other ideas for engaging them. Reading comprehension, where you draw what you read. And this is something I've done a lot with higher levels, because they really need to visualize what they read. Visualizing what you read really helps you understand. So you can use a text. There's one, the first one is a description of a person, the second one is a description of a building. Get them to choose one of those and read it carefully and draw the picture. That will really challenge them in different ways, and it's very engaging, and they really like this. And it's not silly. You can do this at high exam levels because you have to read every word. You have to understand the vocabulary. It's not silly at all. So lots of other activities. I can't actually see what's on my screen at the moment because I've covered it up. Okay, jigsaw activities. You read this article, you read this article, you share, you combine that. Problem solving tasks like the lateral thinking that we saw, a real life problem, discuss it, share what you think, set yourself different quizzes, lots of material there. Really nice game I like to play that is fantastic for helping students develop oracy and speaking skills for exams is the game 60 seconds. 60 seconds for high level students, maybe 15 seconds for A1, A2 students. Give them a topic, or they pull a topic out of a hat and they have to speak for 60 seconds without a long pause. And this is great fun, and they love challenging each other. And, you know, even students that maybe a little, they don't seem very enthusiastic, or they like a bit of a challenge and a bit of a competition there. So that's good. You're mentioning so many activities. I mean, I love Kahoot. I used to use that a lot with my university students. So lots and lots of fantastic ideas there. There is a lot out there, you know, there's a lot of supplementary material in books, there's a lot of stuff online. Let's use it. Let's not get stuck thinking, oh, they're teenagers, they need something serious. Because especially if they are preparing for exams, things can get very miserable for students, and students can lose their motivation very easily, because if you just give them an exam practice test, they do it on their own, they don't do well, they feel like a failure. And this is where you get a lot of demotivation, because we have a lot of exam classes. So how do we make exam prep really success focused and build their confidence? We need to build those skills, we need to build their confidence. So I would say, you know, really approach practice tests with care. They are useful. It's really important for them to know what's in the exam, but they can do it in pairs, they can do it for group work, they can do it for homework. They don't have to do exam practice all the time as a test, because especially, you know, they're just starting, say, a B1 course, they're not going to do very well. It's too early. And it's very important for all of us, teachers included, to really understand what the test involves. The handbooks for the Cambridge exams are really useful. If you have your own tests at school, really understand what students have to do, and they must understand. So for example, how do you work with the timing? How much time do you have? How should you allocate that time? What's the rubric? What do you have to do? I still have, oh my goodness, you know, you get a choice, 3 essay titles. I still have students writing all 3 when it says choose one. This is super, super important that they know how to read it and they know the mark scheme. So many exams, if you're not on topic when you're doing your writing, you lose many points. So that's really important. So this is very important. And yes, and this is true not just for kids, not just for teens, for adults too. So I've given you 4, now number 5. Now number 5, my 5th top tip is something that I really had to learn. And this is something that I've learned and I really think is important with all our students, that it's really important for students to know why they're doing something in class. Because inside their heads, a lot of the time, I think, why are we doing this? What is the point of this? Especially if they're in exam class and you want them to play a game. So get them to engage in the whole process. So when I started sort of teaching, particularly EFL, we were encouraged to play lots of games with students, but I don't remember in my training ever being told to say why we're doing this. And we just anticipated that the students would participate. Or I always say to the students after an activity, I say, did we practice speaking? Did we practice reading? Did we practice listening, etc.? What part of the exam was this useful for? Why is this a good activity to develop your life skills? And after a few times of asking these questions, I'd start and they go, no, we know, it's good for the exam, it's good for our life skills, it's good for collaboration, we know. But it's really important that they appreciate the value of what they do. I think it really adds to that value that they understand it. And it's respectful, you know, that we are trusting them to be part of their own learning process, if you have it that way. Okay, so when we share this, and you know, even with primary, the very little primary ones are quite happy to play any game you want. But, you know, I think most students will see the added value in it. So it's not just vocabulary. It's not just this. So, for example, the P game, this was actually getting you to remember. I said, go quickly. This is really important for so much that we have to be spontaneous. We have to be quick in our response, especially with language. That's very important, isn't it? And that what we're doing is exploring so much more than language, that we know that we say, okay, can you use used to in a sentence? But ask them, you know, is this helping you? Are you pushing your imagination? Is this helping you to channel your imagination? And I think it, you know, absolutely. And so many people have been saying this in this wonderful event, in this festival of learning, that we are helping students. We are really focused on real life skills. And so the classroom should reflect that. And, you know, being successful at school is not just about exam results. They're useful, but you can, you know, even if you don't develop your English, you can still learn so much in the English lesson. And I think that's very, very motivating for a lot of teenagers. So, quick roundup. What were my top tips? Okay, really try and understand your students. Really try and focus on them, pay attention to them. Understand that you're developing so much more than English, life skills, creativity, all these things. Challenge them, get them thinking, get them, you know, ask them really key questions, play games with them, really get them engaged in the lesson. Be careful when you've got an exam class, and talk about why you do things. Okay, quickly, that's just my images. I have a blog if you're interested. There's lots of stuff on there on teaching teens and primary as well. And if it's teens, it's adults too. Olha Madylus, there's only one person with my name on Google, so you'll find it very, very easily. So here we go. Oh, I'm getting hearts from people. Thank you very much, Simonette in Romania. Now we're down to questions, and I shall stop sharing my screen, and hopefully we're going to have some juicy questions. Hi, Jenny.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Olha. That was a really interesting, fun session. Lots of really good ideas there. So yes, everyone, we're going to have a look at questions now. If you've got a question for Olha that you haven't already posted, then pop that in the Q&A box and we'll try and get through as many as we can. But there are some there, so let's jump in, Olha, and have a look. First question, outside the classroom, Olha, what would be a good routine for a teenager to improve their English?
Well, this is where I was talking about differentiation, is to try and discuss with students what they're interested in. So, you know, there are so many things online that students could get involved in. So if you find someone who's really interested in, I know, in heavy metal music, they could be listening to songs, reading the lyrics, you know, really trying to develop their English through that. If they're interested in fashion, they could be reading fashion articles and magazines. And I think that the key there is that they're doing something that they're interested in, because there's no point just saying, read the newspaper, you know, it's not going to be motivating. So really, that's where the dialogue is interesting, and you're finding out about your students and really finding out what they want to do. We don't know. We make silly assumptions. Well, I made silly assumptions that students, okay, they would be interested in football or whatever, but really allowing them to make those choices. So there's a lot of stuff, certainly online. It's difficult to say, well, go and travel to a different country and, you know, we're in lockdown, but practically I would definitely say explore online options. So many good websites, so much good stuff. Just go, I mean, obviously Cambridge has lots of fantastic material. British Council has a lot of really good stuff. There's a separate website for teenagers which has loads of good stuff, so definitely go there.
Yeah, okay. You've got quite a few questions. They're quite big, these questions. I'm just trying to pick a nice one out. We've got a question here which is quite interesting, a juicy question. If you've had a student who's not motivated because they've been learning English for a long time and not made any progress, for example, at primary school, they've now come to secondary school, what might you do to be able to sort of reinvigorate that motivation level?
Yeah, I think that's quite tricky. I mean, it just reminds me, when I was in Venezuela, I taught in Venezuela for 2 years, and I had a class of kids, and they were about 15, 16, but they were around A1. So they had gone through years and years of learning, and they found it really demotivating, the whole lot of them. You know, they didn't want to speak English because they felt they were failures. And the thing that worked with them was just magical, really, was jazz chants, because they were able to pick up chunks of language and use it in class. So I did one that was like, what's it called? It's time to go to bed. What time is it? And they started saying, it's time to have break. And it was just a lucky thing there. But if you just have one student in a class who's gone through that experience, I would definitely do the whole, you know, the tutorial, the talking about it, the asking them how can I help you? What do you see here? And I think it can be very motivating for that student to realize that you care and you want them to do well, and that you might spend a little bit more time with them, suggesting things. I mean, I'm not saying spend hours with them giving them extra English, but maybe, you know, you could create some kind of buddy system in class where you make sure they're in a group where other students will help. Students like helping each other because it really builds up their ego that, oh, I know enough English, I can help somebody. So think of different ways of doing it. Don't just think that student's lost. Just try and use your imagination. Ask other students what they think. You know, here's this guy, he needs our help. How can we help him? I definitely see the classroom as a little community, as a little family, and that we're all trying to help each other. So I would have a go at that. But I think a lot of kids do fall through those cracks, and very often they'll end up in the same class as well. So we need to try and think of ways of kind of jazzing it up for them.
Yeah, jazzing up with jazz chants. I like it.
Juicy jazz chants.
Yeah. Okay, another question here. What attitude, some attitudes a teacher should not adopt when dealing with teens?
Confrontation should be avoided at all costs, because I just think it's just too negative. I try. I mean, it's not always easy because it's hard work. I try very hard not to show annoyance with students and not to look as if I'm angry. If there's a situation where they're frustrating me, I take some time out, but then I do talk to them. I'll say, you know, can you stay at the end of the lesson? I just like to chat with you. Or during the lesson, I'll say, you know, can you tell me what am I doing wrong? And I do, if you read about emotional intelligence, that's a fantastic way to do it, that you don't blame somebody else for a situation. You don't say, you are being naughty, you are giving me a hard time. You say, oh, I feel really bad, I know, have I done something wrong? And you allow them to talk about it. So definitely, I learned a lot from the Daniel Goleman books on emotional intelligence, of how to turn the situation so that the other person, because a lot of the time teenagers are lashing out, they're different because their life is so complex and they're so frustrated and overworked that actually they're so fed up with people going, oh, no. So I try to kind of turn the tables a bit and just kind of say, oh, I'm really sorry, have I done something wrong? And then, because if you start doing this, you get nowhere fast.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to approach it.
Well, I think this is the thing with being diagnostic. You're trying to understand psychology and to understand the student and trying to see it from their perspective. And that's when I started teaching teenagers, I felt it was a battle. I wasn't enjoying myself. I was really suffering, and there was me saying to them, oh, you're so naughty and you're so this, and it just doesn't work. So I speak from experience, and many years of experience.
Yeah. And I think you've actually answered a couple of other questions here from people about disciplining teens, you know, when a reprimand doesn't work, if someone's constantly misbehaving, or for someone who's consistently not doing their assignments and attending class.
Well, this is it. Yeah, talk to them, find out why. Because sometimes it's so obvious. It's like, well, I can't do it, it's too difficult. Or, you know, if you're a teenager and you go through a whole series of being told this was not good enough, this is bad. You know, that horrible thing, I used to have it as a kid, where your teacher would write, try harder. You know, what does that mean? How can I try? I'm trying. So actually, you know, rather than reprimand, diagnose. Look, you know, it's an iceberg. What you see is maybe a slightly aggressive, fed up student, and what's underneath is somebody struggling, and somebody who would appreciate you just being kind and saying, okay, don't worry, I see it all the time, say, don't worry, you know, we'll solve this problem together, we'll do our best to try and solve this, you know, investigate.
Yeah, brilliant advice. Okay, well, I think that's just about all we've got time for today. But thank you again, Olha, for a really brilliant session. And thank you to everyone who's attended and joined us for the Global Schools Festival. We'd also hope you can join us for the next session, which is at 4 o'clock today, GMT, the secrets of successful learning. So if you're available, take a look at that one as well. But thank you for coming. And thanks again, Olha.
Yeah, take care, everybody. Be safe, be well.